is an egg-shaped structure. You know what is an egg. So it has a very, very much broader posterior end and much narrower anterior end. It has surfaces: superior surface, inferior surface, lateral surface, and medial surface. So it has 4 surfaces. It also has some nuclei. You know, the whole of the thalamus is made up of a bunch of nuclei. It is situated below the cerebral cortex, so we can say that it is a subcortical structure. You understand, similar to the basal nuclei that I discussed with you previously. So also the thalamus is a subcortical structure located within the cerebral hemisphere, and the two together, you know, they bound a space known as third ventricle. So we have left thalamus, we have right thalamus. So in between the two thalami is a space known as third ventricle. So the whole of the thalamus is, as I told you before, is made up of several group of nuclei. If you now take a cross-section of the thalamus is being, you know, divided into 3 different parts or portions. We have anterior part, we have medial part, and then we have lateral part. What divides the internal morphology of the thalamus is what you call, you know, intramedullary lamina. It is a bundle of white matter fibers of axons in form of Y-shaped. You know, you can see this one, it looks like a Y. So within these bundles of nerve fibers, you know, are scattered nuclei. But one prominent nucleus in there, which is one of the most important among them, is what we call centromedian nucleus. So within this Y-shaped figure Y structure that divides the thalamus into anterior portion, medial portion, and lateral portion, that is what you call intramedullary lamina. And within it, I said there are some scattered nuclei in there, but one of the most important and prominent one among them is what we call centromedian nucleus. We'll see its function. So in the anterior compartment of the thalamus, we have one nucleus, what we call anterior thalamic nucleus, part of the limbic function of the thalamus. So the medial part of the thalamus has a large nucleus known as mediodorsal nucleus. So the mediodorsal nucleus is responsible for the limbic function of the thalamus. So mediodorsal nucleus of the thalamus plus the anterior thalamic nucleus, the two together are responsible for the limbic function of the thalamic. You all know what are the limbic system, what is limbic system, and what are the functions of the limbic system. So the anterior thalamic nucleus as well as the mediodorsal thalamic nucleus are responsible for the limbic function of the thalamus. So the lateral part of the thalamus is made up of about 5 nuclei. So when you divide the lateral part of the thalamus into 2 parts, posterior part and anterior part. So in the anterior part of the lateral part of the thalamus, we have about 4 nuclei. We have one that is most anterior. We call it ventroanterior nucleus of the thalamus. We have another nucleus that is more or less on the lateral side. That one is called ventrolateral thalamic nucleus. Then on the posterior part of these 2 nuclei, we have one that is on the medial side, what you call ventropostero-medial nucleus of the thalamus. And then we have the other one that is lateral, what you call ventroposterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. So the ventroanterior and the ventrolateral group of nuclei, they are responsible for the motor functions of the thalamus. So it means that thalamus has one limbic function that I already discussed, that is mediodorsal nucleus and the anterior thalamic nucleus, and then it has motor functions that include the ventroanterior and ventrolateral group of nuclei responsible for convey motor information from the cerebral cortex, and then it goes into the other places. So we'll also have this ventral-posteromedial nucleus and ventral-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. These two thalamic nuclei are responsible for the sensory functions of the thalamus. So it means that thalamus has three important functions: limbic function, motor function, and sensory function. Similarly, the posterior part of the lateral portion of the thalamus, there is one large nucleus known as pulvinar nucleus. This pulvinar is also for the sensory, function of the thalamus. So the ventral-posteromedial nucleus, ventral-posterolateral nucleus, and the pulvinar, they are all for the sensory functions of the thalamus. If you now take the ventral-posteromedial nucleus, this one conveys the sensation from the head and the neck. Any kind of sensation that you can think of, be it proprioception, vibration sense, discrimination touch, you understand, then pain, temperature, and pressure, you understand, fine touch, crude touch, all this sensation from the head and the neck have been taken through the fifth cranial nerve, known as trigeminal nerve. This is the nucleus where this sensation is relayed. The other sensation from other part of the body, like from the trunk and the limbs, that is both upper and the lower limbs, the trunk, including the thorax and the abdomen, all the sensation from these portions that I've made mention, with the exception of the head and neck, all the sensation, they pass through this ventral-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. That means all this proprioception, temperature, pain, pressure, vibration sense, and so on and so forth, they pass here. For the head and neck is ventral-posteromedial nucleus. For the remaining part of the body, ventral-posterolateral nucleus. Are you all clear? Good. Apart from this general sensation that I have made mention, there are some special senses. These special senses include our taste sensation. You understand? The taste sensation is being carried through the centromedian nucleus. Are you clear? Which is located within this intramedullary lamina. Apart from that, part of the special senses, if you can remember, include hearing. You understand? So the hearing, sensation for hearing from the internal ear, finally before it reaches the hearing center or the auditory center in the temporal lobe, it has to pass through the medial genicular body. You remember M for music. That is how you can remember where the hearing information goes. So it goes to the medial genicular body, M for music. So hearing sensation goes into the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. Similarly, apart from these two special senses that I've made mention, that is taste sensation and the hearing, we also have vision. Vision is also a spatial sense. So all visual stimuli, before they finally reach the visual cortex in the cerebral hemisphere, they must pass through the lateral genicular body. You remember L for light. Light. So that means light for the vision. So visual stimuli goes to lateral genicular body before the information reaches finally to the occipital lobe or visual center in the posterior part of each of the cerebral hemisphere. So we have now seen different functions of the thalamus: spatial senses, general sensation, motor, function, and limbic function. Are you clear? These are the different functions of the thalamus. So now, thalamus can be damaged or can have problem as a result of the following. There are vascular diseases that can affect the thalamus. Thalamus is being also supplied by arteries. So the thalamus, if one of the vessels supplying the thalamus is being blocked or is being, injured so that it gets ruptured as a result of maybe hypertension or diabetic mellitus, these vessels can get damaged, and so the arterial supply to the thalamus is going to be affected. That can cause thalamic or thalamus lesion. You understand? Similarly, metabolic diseases that I've told you, the hypertension and diabetes mellitus, are the ones that can cause these vascular diseases or vascular injuries. Similarly, inflammatory diseases, as a result of maybe certain chemicals, can cause inflammation that can affect the cerebral hemisphere, which can also go and infect or affect the thalamus. Trauma, that means injury as a result of maybe road traffic accident, domestic accident, or whatever type of accident, can also affect the thalamus. Tumor, that means neoplastic conditions, cancer, can affect the thalamus, and that can also cause thalamic lesion or thalamus lesion. Similarly, infection as a result of all this bacterial or viral infection. So these are some of the causes of the lesions or lesion of the thalamus. So now, what are the features that one can see if somebody has thalamic, lesions? You see, as a rider, what I've said about the functions of the thalamus, thalamus is just like a relay station. A relay station in the sense that it is a station whereby all the, impulses, either sensory impulses, motor impulses, or stimuli, or spatial impulses, they all have to gather into the thalamus before they finally go into their various destinations. It's just like the station that you are aware of. If you want to travel to your own locations, for example, maybe some of you are from Lagos, some they are from Taraba, some from Adamawa. If you want to go to these places, you have to go to the station, probably inside Kano town. So once you go to the main station, you have various vehicles that can convey you to different, areas or states in Nigeria. So at the end of the day, all of you will gather in the station, but finally each one of you will go to his own house. That is exactly what is going on with the thalamus. All this information with regard to all this temperature, pain, whatever, they have to go through the thalamus first as a station where all this information will gather before they finally reach different part of the areas in the cerebral cortex or in the subcortical structures and what have you. So now, if the thalamus is being affected by any of these causes that have been mentioned before, the lesion can affect either the motor component or the sensory component, the limbic component, or the spatial senses component. You don't need to even memorize what I have written on the board. If you all know the functions of the thalamus, once you have lesion of any of these areas, those functions will be affected. For example, now, if I say the medial dorsal nucleus and the anterior thalamic nucleus are affected, if that is the only area where the thalamus is affected, that means limbic function is going to be affected. And you all know what are the limbic functions, all the sexual behavior, emotion due to smell, and so on and so forth. They are all part of the limbic functions. Similarly, if you are now talking about the motor function of the thalamus, if it is the lateral side of the thalamus that is affected, definitely the ventral-anterior and the ventral-lateral nucleus of the thalami are going to be affected. So that means motor functions or motor impairment is going to happen because these two nuclei are affected. Because the motor, information or impulses, as they descend from the cortex, they must pass through the thalamus before they finally go into the lower part of the brain, like the brainstem and the spinal cord. So that means there will be motor impairment if this lateral side of the thalamus is affected. Similarly, the sensation or sensations, head and neck, the other part of the body, if this side is affected, all these vibration sense, pain, temperature, proprioception, and so on and so forth, head and neck and the part of the different part of the body, if this part is affected, sensation is going to be affected. Similarly, if the lateral genicular body is been damaged, that means there is going to be visual impairment. If the medial genicular body is affected, that means there is going to be hearing impairment. So everything now is very simple for you people to understand. You don't even need to memorize these things. Other things that you may likely know, that there's what we call thalamic aphasia. This thalamic aphasia is just like difficulty, in speech related to the damage to the thalamus, and also other things that can also, happen as a result of thalamic damage is something to do with memory loss. If you can remember, I said limbic functions. If this is the medial side or the anterior part is affected, limbic function is going. Part of the limbic function is to do with memory also. So that is going to be memory loss if that area is affected. So you have to work everything out if you are discussing about, not only thalamus, any other part of the brain or any other part of the body. If you know the function, so if that area or side is affected, definitely you know that the functions are going to be affected. What we mean by hemiparesis, is like half of the body is going to be affected, because we have two thalami, one left, one right. If it is the left that has been affected, the opposite side is going to be affected. That means the motor functions, that is what you call hemiparesis, weakness of half of the body. Similar to what we observe in, the stroke. When somebody has stroke, you have what we call hemiplegia. That means one half of the body is paralyzed, but with regard to the thalamic damage or lesion, you only have what you call hemiparesis, weakness of one half of the body. If it is one side of the thalamus that has been affected, you understand. So if there is motor infirmity, you can also have difficulty in swallowing, what we call dysphagia. That means you are having difficulty, in swallowing things. You can also have tremors in the hand. When you are just sitting down, you will have, your hands would be having some, shaky movements like that, what we call hand tremors and what have you. So these are by and large, some of the features and the causes of the thalamic or thalamus lesion. And so I'm going to have a break here before I now continue with the next topic.